How does one adequately describe a city where you can order any one of about 25 different kinds of coffee? Vienna is always a city of many choices. Its diversity has historical roots. Coffee was left behind by the Turks after an unsuccessful siege. Wine was introduced by the Romans, who had a military camp on the site of Vienna's inner city 2,000 years ago. Vienna is the capital of Austria, a federal province in its own right and a municipality. It is home to 1.5 million people. The city is divided into 23 districts. Its heart is the first district, the inner city. Nearly 200 years after the Turkish siege, Emperor Francis Joseph had the city walls torn down so he could redesign the cramped capital of the empire and imperial residence. The result was a boulevard flanked by parks and magnificent buildings that encircled the first district. It is called the Ring. The first building to go up on the Ring was the Court Opera, now the State Opera. Neither of its two architects lived to see the splendid opening with Mozart's Don Giovanni. Eduard von der Null was so upset by the building's critics that he committed suicide, and his colleague, August Sickardsburg, died of a heart attack. This is where the Opera Ball takes place each year. The ball is the climax of Vienna's carnival season. The opera's stage and auditorium are turned into a huge ballroom for 7,000 socialites from around the world. International high society has always danced in Vienna, for instance in 1814 during the Congress of Vienna. But that summit of emperors, kings, and princes had a highly political background, the dividing up of Europe after Napoleon's defeat at the hands of the Allies. It was the apogee of the history of the Hofburg Palace, which remained the residence of the Habsburg family until the abolition of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. The huge complex that is called the Hofburg has numerous wings. They bear witness to the size, magnificence, and wealth of old Austria. Their architecture ranges from Gothic to early 20th century. In fact, the Hofburg was a building site for 700 years because there was hardly a Habsburg emperor who didn't add something. Despite the mixture of styles that has resulted, the building still has an overall harmony. Today, the Hofburg Palace is the elegant venue for international conferences. Memorials to the heroes of yesteryear guard the Hofburg. Archduke Charles defeated Napoleon. Prince Eugene crushed the Turks. Heldenplatz Square came into being when Napoleon had the Burg Bastion blown up during his withdrawal from Vienna. These mighty architectural twins on the Ring are the Museum of Art, and opposite, its mirror image, the Museum of Natural History. Empress Maria Theresia reigns on the throne between the two museums. The figures at her feet include the young Mozart. As a child, he sat on the Empress's lap. The Museum of Art and the Museum of Natural History house many precious collections, including a gallery of paintings, a coin collection, and displays covering every aspect of nature. This used to be the meeting place of the Imperial Council. Today it's the home of Austria's two houses of parliament. Theophil Hansen, its architect, studied in Greece. This is why the building is reminiscent of the temples of ancient Greece. Its entire design glorifies ancient Athens and its democracy. The Greek goddess, Pallas Athene, stands guard in front of the Parliament building. Vienna's city hall, the Rathaus, seat of the city's administration and the province's government. The tower above the home of the city's governing authorities is guarded by a lonely knight, the Rathausmann. The Rathausmann is one of Vienna's landmarks, watching over the city from a height of more than 300 feet. The Burgtheater, or Palace Theater, is directly opposite City Hall. It's one of the world's oldest and most eminent theaters. The Stadtpark is alongside the ring. It was designed according to the plans of a landscape painter, and a lovely landscape is exactly what the park is. Covering some 140,000 square yards, this is always a peaceful and romantic spot one can come to in order to relax. The many monuments in the park include one obligatory snapshot for tourists, Johann Strauss, the Gilded Waltz King. He wrote about 500 pieces. He said that his music had its roots in Viennese soil and Viennese air. Kärntnerstrasse is Vienna's principal business and shopping street. It links the Ring, near the State Opera, to the center of the inner city. Here, history is reflected in the present, as Vienna's best-known landmark, St. Stephen's Cathedral, is mirrored in the newer buildings on the square. St. Stephen's Cathedral looks back on a history of more than 800 years. Stylistically, it's a mixture of Romanesque, Gothic, and some Baroque. The blend of architectural styles is one of contrast and nevertheless of harmony. When Viennese wine had a sour vintage in the 15th century, it was mixed in with the building materials used in the cathedral to help preserve them. St. Stephen's Tower, known to the Viennese as Steffel, is the world's third tallest church tower at 450 feet. The cathedral's roof is clad with 230,000 tiles. St. Stephen's Square is also the site of one of the ranks for the horse-drawn carriages the Viennese call fiacres. They're named after the street in Paris, Saint-Fiacre, where these coaches were available for hire for the first time. The coachmen themselves, also called fiacres, are among the remaining real Viennese characters. The erstwhile defensive ditch dug by the Romans is now one of the best business addresses, the Graben. An imperial vow led to the erection of the Trinity or Plague column in the middle of the Graben following the plague in the 17th century. St. Charles's Church was also built as the result of a vow made during the plague. The mighty dome designed by Fischer von Erlach is 237 feet high. Schönbrunn Palace, the pleasure palace and idyllic summer seat of their Imperial Highnesses. It is named after the Schöner Brunnen, or beautiful well, that used to supply the palace with water. Maria Theresia had Schönbrunn enlarged and redesigned. She was the mother to 16 children, so she needed a lot of space just to accommodate the imperial offspring. This magnificent palace has a total of 1,441 rooms and halls. The interior has been preserved in its original form, illustrating the magnificence and splendor of imperial life. Today, Schönbrunn is still a splendid venue for state receptions. The Gloriette Monument stands on a hill in the palace's park. It's a memorial put up by the imperial court to commemorate the victims of war. The Belvedere Palace was the summer residence of the Austrian Field Marshal Prince Eugene of Savoy. Prince Eugene served under 3 emperors, fighting the Turks and the French. He himself was called the empire's secret emperor. The 1955 state treaty between Austria and the Allies was signed in the Belvedere Palace. It was this treaty that gave Austria back its freedom and sovereignty. This city of music has a special building for its music society, the Musikverein. The time-honored Society of Friends of Music had it built more than 100 years ago for its school of music. The Golden Hall in the Musikverein is said to have the finest acoustics of any concert hall in the world. It is the venue for concerts of the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra, and their annual New Year's concert is broadcast from here around the globe. The best way to get a ticket for a concert by the Vienna Philharmonic is to be related to a regular member of the audience. Many of the concert subscriptions are handed down from generation to generation within the same family. To the age, it's art. To art, it's freedom. This is the motto above the erstwhile exhibition hall of the Association of Artists that created a new artistic movement at the turn of the century. The building is called the Sezession. It marked a departure from the overloaded architectural style of the ring palaces, representing the Viennese form of Art Nouveau, called Jugendstil. A portrait of a woman by the secessionist leading painter Gustav Klimt. It is not far from the artistic temple of the Sezession to 2 Jugendstil houses built by the period's architectural pioneer Otto Wagner. Most of his designs were primarily practical. During his first lecture as a professor of the Academy, he said, "What is not useful cannot be beautiful." The 2 pavilions of the former municipal railway on Karlsplatz Square are both practical and beautiful. Today they serve as a cafe and a Jugendstil exhibition area. The church of the Steinhof Psychiatric Institution was also designed by Otto Wagner. The stained glass in the church is by Kolo Moser, co-founder of the Wiener Werkstätte workshop, which had a major influence on the craftsmanship of the Jugendstil period. Otto Wagner designed this massive weir, the Nussdorfer Weir, at the branching off of the Danube Canal in order to regulate the canal's flow. This, close to the Danube Canal, used to be the site of the Emperor's Baths, dedicated for public use by Emperor Francis Joseph. Otto Wagner built this so-called Schützenhaus to house its technical equipment. Visitors can take a number of special Otto Wagner Jugendstil excursions along the Danube Canal. But a boat ride along the canal is very pleasant regardless of the reason. The Karl-Marx-Hof is one of Vienna's biggest civic housing estates. Its street-side facade is more than 1,000 yards long. It is one of the so-called people's residential palaces built for workers between the two world wars. At the time, this project represented a huge step forward. This is also civic housing, but more recent and in a different style. It was designed by the painter Friedensreich Hundertwasser, a lover of the crooked and the out of line. The house has wavy corridors, leaning pillars, and non-matching windows. The tenants live in a honeycomb of caves with innumerable nooks and crannies and uneven floors. Hundertwasser sees his design as a model for an individualistic, unconventional lifestyle. Modern Vienna is also an international city. The Vienna International Center, or VIC, is a city within a city, making Vienna the third United Nations metropolis alongside New York and Geneva. The gigantic building cost Austria a lot of money. The UN only pays a symbolic annual rent of 1 Austrian shilling. On the other hand, the presence of this global organization reinforces Austria's moral and political position in the world. The late Austrian Chancellor Bruno Kreisky called it more effective than guns and rockets. A city with so much history also preserves its heritage. Vienna has almost 60 museums, countless collections, monuments and galleries, and innumerable memorials. The Treasury, or Schatzkammer in the Hofburg Palace, houses treasures from the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, Baroque, and Rococo periods. They include the imperial insignia of the Holy Roman Empire. The Schatzkammer is the world's most important and valuable collection of this kind. But even magnificence and glory have their mortal term. The Imperial Vault, the Kaisergruft, is the burial place of the Habsburg family, including 12 emperors and 17 empresses. According to the family's tradition, the body, heart, and entrails are buried separately. The bodies are here in the Kaisergruft. The hearts are in the Church of St. Augustine. The urns containing the entrails are in the catacombs below St. Stephen's Cathedral. The Imperial Vault is watched over by the Capuchin friars, which is why it is also called the Capuchin Vault. The Albertina Museum contains the world's biggest collection of graphic art. 40,000 drawings and more than 1 million engravings, etchings, and lithographs are kept in this former town palace. A part of the collection is shown each year in rotating exhibitions. The graphic collection at the Albertina covers every country and artistic style. Historical weapons and uniforms are to be found at the Museum of Military History at the Arsenal, which used to be a massive military installation. The Field Marshal's Hall contains marble statues of 56 Austrian military leaders. Frescoes in the Hall of Fame show scenes from Austrian history. The history of the museum itself has been almost as turbulent. Like much of Europe, Vienna experienced an attempted October Revolution in 1848, when the people revolted against the imperial army. During the revolt, the arsenal in the center of town was stormed, prompting the erection of this arsenal outside the city limits. The collections in the Museum of Military History still consist in part of weapons from the old imperial arsenal, which dated back to the 17th century. The museum offers the visitor a comprehensive survey of the history of the Austrian army from the 30 Years' War up to World War I. The defense of the West against the Turks occupies a special place in the museum's historical section. When a Turkish army beleaguered Vienna for the second time in 1683, the whole of Middle Europe was threatened. The oil paintings are historically accurate representations of the battles to liberate Vienna. The Imperial Army and troops from Bavaria, Saxony, and Poland defeated the Turks. Since it was built almost 150 years ago, the Museum of Military History has been a kind of Hall of Fame for the Imperial Army. However, it also tells of the end of the monarchy's glory. The successor to the throne, Francis Ferdinand, and his wife were shot at Sarajevo on June 28, 1914. In this car. The assassination marked the start of World War I and the beginning of the monarchy's collapse. More than a century earlier, in a still intact monarchy, Emperor Joseph II founded an institute for the practical illustrative instruction of military doctors, the Josephinum. It has become a world-famous wax anatomy collection with reproductions of every part of the human body and every internal organ. One particularly impressive exhibit is this wax model of a woman with real hair and fold-open organs. The more than 1,000 exhibits in this chamber of horrors were made by Italian sculptors before being realistically colored and covered with a special beeswax. This also has to do with the human body and health, but in a negative way. Every Austrian cigarette pack bears a warning by the Minister of Health. Smoking can be harmful to your health. Friends of the habit can find a number of historical curiosities in the Tobacco Museum. Like Germany's oldest pipe. Or this intricate giant pipe. It's more than 3 feet long and weighs almost 9 pounds. The 200 finely carved figures on the bowl depict a Habsburg victory in battle. Snuff boxes. And the collection also includes Turkish hookahs. Common in the Orient, the hookah passes the smoke over water or draws it through. Going, going, gone. That's what you hear in Vienna's Dorotheum auction house when an item goes to the highest bidder. There are auctions practically daily, and if you look hard enough, you can buy anything here, from cooking spoons to vacuum cleaners, from paintings to model sailing ships. Emperor Joseph I founded this pawn shop almost 300 years ago, so the poor of Vienna could borrow money against the security of something of value without paying the usurious interest rates of the private moneylenders. Today, Vienna's Dorotheum is one of Europe's biggest auction houses and a major force in the European fine arts market. The city's oldest music shop is in the same street. It is famous for its antiquarian department, where music enthusiasts can buy old editions of every major composer's works. This wedge, squeezed between two typical Viennese alleys, houses the city's clock museum. It covers the complete history of timepieces, from the pocket watches of the 15th century to intricate clockwork creations. There are 3,000 clocks and watches here, and most of them work. Everything turns, ticks, and rings 24 hours a day. The physicist and astronomer Galileo Galilei invented the use of the pendulum. "20 exhibition rooms take the visitor on a 500-year journey through time in a unique collection that ranges from the Gothic era to today. This tower clock is a real heavyweight, weighing in at a total of 1.5 tons. It has the same mechanism as was used in towers and churches back in the 13th century. This hourglass also marks the passage of time. Pompe funèbre, a magnificent funeral. Vienna also has a museum of death. The Museum of Undertaking is the only one in the world. Pompe funèbre is also the root of the Viennese word pompe funèbre, which is what the city calls its coffin bearers. The Museum of Death contains everything you need for a magnificent funeral, from coffin bearers' uniforms to black horses' tackle. The museum also has a reusable coffin invented by Emperor Joseph II. The floor opens, the corpse drops into the grave, and the budget coffin is ready for the next customer. A model of a funeral escort by the Austrian army. The festive escorts for the dead were categorized into classes according to the importance of the deceased. A corpse of the magnificent class was accompanied by a sumptuous cortege. The funeral ceremony had extra coffin bearers, and even the horses wore splendid tackle. One died as one lived, A magnificent life earned a pompe funèbre. Vienna has a particularly close relationship to death. Wine tavern songs even sing of it, and a visit to a Viennese cemetery can be a memorable experience. Death must be a Viennese has become a local saying. As one Viennese songwriter put it, long live the central cemetery and all its dead. There are about 3 million dead buried here, or about twice the city's population. Vienna's central cemetery is one of Europe's biggest and well over 100 years old. A walk through its avenues with its 2,000 graves of honor is a walk through the history of Vienna's art, culture, and politics. This is a city where death is celebrated, whether with the help of the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra or the State Opera Choir or by wine tavern musicians. An annual hare and partridge drive is held here at the Central Cemetery. It's required by law to protect the flowers and wreaths, but of course it is not a public event. The St. Mark's Cemetery in Vienna's 3rd district is the world's only cemetery in Biedermeier style. It is also the burial place of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, but this is only a memorial, because nobody knows which pauper's grave really holds his body. The St. Mark's Cemetery bears witness, at least in death, to the International Brotherhood of Man. Many of the gravestones bear inscriptions from foreign countries. This is certainly Vienna's most discreet cemetery. There is hardly an inscription to commemorate a particular person. It's the cemetery of the unnamed in the Danube's floodplain. Every 10 years or so, the Danube also floods the cemetery and makes it look even sadder. The Prater Park is a huge area of natural beauty with extensive lawns and sports facilities. Originally, it was an imperial hunting preserve to which only the aristocracy had access. It was made public by Emperor Joseph II. The aristocrats of the court protested, pointing out there was nowhere left where they could meet with their own kind. The emperor's terse answer was, "If I want to meet with my own kind, the only place I can go in Vienna is the Imperial Vault." About 3 miles of Chestnut Avenue lead to the Lusthaus, a centuries-old pavilion that now serves as a coffee house and restaurant. It rotates at 1.7 miles per hour and is about to celebrate its 100th birthday. The Viennese Ferris wheel, the only one in the world that is still operating. This technical marvel was designed by an English engineer, Walter Bassett, at the end of the last century. It is precisely at Vienna's geographical meridian. It points north and south, and its axis points east-west. Its highest point is 213 feet above the ground. The entire structure weighs 430 tons. The big wheel was one of society's meeting points during the monarchy. It was used for weather forecasting and as a military lookout post. It was burned down twice, and it has also been pawned and auctioned during its history. It survived 2 world wars. Like a real Viennese, it couldn't be beaten. About 1 million people ride the big wheel each year. The Prater amusement park spreads out below.
In diesem Geisterschloss sind heute die Geister los.
It's a city within a city, full of shows and shooting galleries, roundabouts, gambling halls, and ghost trains. It really comes to life at night. It is also a place to work off one's aggressions on the Watschenmann, who will take anything you can throw at him. Just to explain, Watsche is Viennese slang for a slap. Some people seem to think the Bermuda Triangle is a group of islands in the Atlantic. Informed people know it's an area of Vienna's old town that is full of unusual night spots. It's called the Bermuda Triangle because this is a place where you can disappear in the evening and, they say, never reappear. The bars are relaxed and informal. They serve every kind of food from the traditional Viennese to the exotic and foreign. You can drink everything from a range of at least 50 different kinds of beer to tequila. Many of the bars also offer entertainment from poetry reading to live bands. This is the Roter Engel, Red Angel.
The sun lights up the daytime. The moon lights up the night. My eyes light up when you call my name. No, you know, treat me right.
Havelka in Dorotheergasse is one of Vienna's 50 genuine coffee houses. It may be a relic of the past, but it's still a very popular meeting place today. The couple who own it are real Viennese characters who have been looking after their colorfully mixed clientele for decades. This is a kind of artist's cafe, and Mr. Havelka is himself an artist. If he's particularly fond of a guest, he will sometimes agree to show him or her a few of his watercolors. Havelka is an old and very cozy coffee house where even the posters on the wall have become a tradition. Vienna's Heurigen, the wine taverns, also have a long tradition. You can recognize them by the fir or pine branches displayed outside. They range from the simple Buschenschank or bush bar to elegant establishments, offering the visitor every kind of relaxed Viennese atmosphere. Since the days of Emperor Joseph II, every Viennese has had the freedom to serve and sell his own wine. Not that the vintners hadn't been doing that anyway for 1,000 years before the emperor's decree. Almost every Heuriger also boasts an excellent buffet serving Viennese specialities in addition to the wine, and Viennese songs and music can be heard in many of them. A visitor who does not look very deeply might see Vienna as a huge waltzing cliché. It is true that people do a lot of waltzing here. They eat a lot of cake, and all is well with the Viennese world when you have a glass of wine in your hand. But that is only a very superficial view. If you can find a Viennese who is willing to open not only his mouth but also his heart, you will gain a profounder insight. You may not come across the much-cited golden Viennese heart, but you will get to know Vienna and the Viennese better. However, if you listen to the Viennese, you might think it must be dreadful to live here. The Viennese is a constant moaner. Rouncing or griping is a particularly Viennese habit. But never try to criticize Vienna as an outsider, or you will come up against all the anger of a Viennese defending his city like a lion. Live and let live is the philosophy of this city. The Viennese wants his peace and quiet and lets others have theirs. This is part of Vienna's renowned Gemütlichkeit, which translates roughly as congeniality. There is no conflict between old and new in this city. Tradition and modernness exist in harmony. The result is exciting and attractive variety. Over the centuries, many nationalities have left their mark on this city. Many so-called real Viennese descend from people who never saw Vienna. This is the reason for its diversity. Melting pot of nations is much more than a catchphrase. It is a day-to-day Viennese reality. We wanted to show you Vienna, but 45 minutes is just not enough time to do it properly. This city deserves a closer acquaintance.